Philippians 2:12 through 18. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. In verses 12 to 13, Paul reminds the church in Philippi that God is working out in his beloved what pleases him as they work out their own salvation. So he is behind and is undergirding the pursuit of his children to be like him. So right off the bat, we have a sweet encouragement in the midst of what is a very challenging imperative in verse 14. God is pleased to work with his children as they fight for obedience, as they fight to be worthy of the calling to which they've been called. He wants this more than we do, so he will certainly not abandon us in this fight. Remember this in your life groups as you do the hard work of evaluating your obedience to this command in verse 14. So here's a quick summary before some application questions. You could break this text into two main parts: the nature of the imperative, what's Paul calling us away from? And then the aim of the imperative, what's Paul calling us toward? So point one, Paul is calling us away from grumbling and disputing. To say it another way, grumbling or complaining should not accompany anything that we do. This is a hard word. If we look closely, we can see the connection between this text and Deuteronomy 32, a text that refers to the crooked and twisted wilderness generation, who were unmindful of the rock that bore them and forgot the God who gave them birth. Their God redeemed them out of slavery and was strong enough to guide them at every point, but they grumbled against him. And they disliked their circumstances, questioning his power and care. Paul says, don't be like them. Refrain from this practice, a practice that led Moses to call that generation no longer children. So grumbling is a serious offense that minimizes or belittles God. But strangely, despite its seriousness, it's incredibly common, so common that those who refuse to grumble are startlingly bright. They shine as lights in the world, as Paul says. And this is what we're called to. To not grumble is to be a witness to our all-satisfying, trustworthy God. So point two, Paul is calling us to show that we are his children by displaying our trust and satisfaction in him when circumstances aren't exactly the way that we want them. So we do this by holding fast to the gospel, as Paul says in verse 16. So the main point of this text is that those who trust in God and are satisfied in him will put away all grumbling, showing that they are his children. A certain pastor I know likes to say, when you're bumped, you spill what you're full of. When we're bumped by our circumstances, do we spill out mistrust, ungratefulness, or anxiety? Or is it trust, satisfaction, or hope that pours out? Unwanted circumstances quickly become a litmus test of where our hearts are at before God. So some application questions to consider thinking about this text. One, if we're not careful, grumbling can slip into our hearts or come out of our lips undetected. What are some reasons why we so easily forget that our grumbling is against God and not simply a neutral commentary about our circumstances? Said negatively, Paul says we shine by refusing to grumble. Positively, verse 16 shows that one of the main ways we shine as lights in the world is by holding fast to the word of life. So the question is, how does a firm grip on the gospel affect how we react to unwanted circumstances? 3, why are grumble-free people so startling to the world? What does our refusal to grumble say about how we view our circumstances? For example, a proper view of our unwanted circumstances may keep us from dismantling our joy. Lastly, thinking of Jesus, how does his success amid his temptation in the wilderness provide hope to those of us who struggle with grumbling?